The envelope is blue, not the blue of summer skies or corporate logos, but the blue of a dress you once wore to a dinner you have both tried to forget, the one where everything started to unravel, where the thread first pulled loose from the hem. It is faded at the corners where their thumb has worried the paper for 3 days straight, wearing the fibers thin with the same anxious repetition they once used to stroke your hair when they thought you were sleeping. The glue has never been licked. The stamp sits crooked, tilted to the left as if even the postage knows it is leaning into uncertain territory. Your name is written on the front in a hand you would recognize in a burning building, in a dark room, in a crowd of 1,000 strangers, all waving identical pens. It is a hand that used to leave notes inside your lunch bag, a hand that used to circle typos in the newspaper just to make you laugh, a hand that used to write your name in the margins of library books, not as vandalism, but as a private incantation, a spell against forgetting. And right now, at this exact moment, while you are reading these words on a screen that knows nothing of paper or patience, they are holding that envelope in a kitchen that has become too quiet, under a light that has become too bright, trying to find the courage to make the letter real by sending it, but I am getting ahead of the story. Before the envelope, before the stamp, before the pen touched the paper with a tremor that left the ink slightly thicker in some places and ghost thin in others, there was the night. The night they woke up at 3 a.m. with the absolute cellular certainty that they had made the worst mistake of their life. Not a dramatic mistake, not a betrayal that would make a good movie, nothing so cinematic as an affair or a lie or a grand operatic sin. Their mistake was smaller than that, and therefore heavier. Their mistake was 1,000 tiny withdrawals, 1,000 moments of choosing comfort over courage. 1,000 times they looked at your face and saw a guarantee instead of a gift. 1,000 evenings when they came home and gave you the leftovers of their attention, the crumbs of their energy, the polite, exhausted performance of presence while their real self was still at the office, still on the phone, still anywhere but there with you, in the room where love was trying to grow and they kept forgetting to water it. And you felt it. Of course, you felt it. You are Virgo. You feel the shift in barometric pressure when a houseplant is thirsty. You noticed the way their kisses started landing on your cheek instead of your mouth. You noticed the way their stories stopped including you, the way their future tense became singular, the way they said I when they used to say we, without even realizing the grammar had changed. You noticed the dishes left in the sink not because you care about dishes, but because the dishes were evidence of a larger abandonment. You noticed the silence that moved in like a fog, not the peaceful silence of two people who understand each other, but the anxious silence of two people who have stopped trying. And you did what you always do when something is broken. You tried to fix it. You made lists. You suggested date nights. You bought the book. You initiated the conversation with the careful, surgical precision of a heart surgeon approaching a valve that has already begun to fail. And they looked at your effort and they felt the weight of it. And instead of meeting it with their own effort, they let it crush them. They let your love become another item on their to-do list, another obligation, another proof that they were not enough, that they could not give what you deserved, that the person they had become in the relationship was a disappointment even to themselves. So they left, or they made you leave, or they let the distance grow until one of you had to call it what it was, over. And in the aftermath, they told themselves the story that made it bearable. They told themselves that you were too demanding, that your standards were impossible, that your need for quality time, for attention, for the specific, meticulous way you loved was simply too much for any human to sustain. They told themselves that the ending was a relief, that they would be happier alone, that the silence of the apartment without you was peaceful, not punishing. And for a while, the story worked. For a few weeks, maybe even a few months, they moved through their life with the grim efficiency of someone who has just survived a necessary amputation. They went to the gym. They updated their profile. They went out with friends who told them they had done the right thing, that you were intense, that you were a lot, that relationships should not be that hard. And they nodded, and they smiled, and they drank the wine, and they came home to a bed that was exactly the size they wanted it to be, with exactly the number of pillows they preferred. And they lay in the dark and felt nothing. Not happiness, not sadness, just nothing. A flat, gray nothing that they mistook for peace. Until the night. The night I mentioned. The night they woke up at 3 in the morning with your name in their mouth like a stone they had been trying to swallow for months. They sat up in bed. They looked around the room that was finally, perfectly, exactly as they had always claimed to want it, and they realized that the nothing they had been feeling was not peace. It was grief that had not yet found its shape. It was the body's delayed reaction to a loss it had been too numb to process. And in that dark, silent hour, the truth arrived. Not gently, not as a whisper, as a landslide, as a demolition, as the absolute crushing understanding that they had not left because you were too much. They had left because they were too little, because they had allowed their own fear of failure to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because they had looked at your love, which was vast and exacting and beautiful, and they had felt small inside it. And instead of growing to match it, they had shrunk away from it. They had abandoned the one person who saw them, not as a project to be managed, but as a masterpiece to be witnessed. And the weight of that recognition was so heavy that they could not breathe through it. They got out of bed, they walked to the kitchen, they turned on the light that was too bright, and they wept, not prettily, not cinematically. They wept like a child who has broken their own favorite toy and only just realized that no one is coming to fix it for them. If your throat has tightened, if you are touching that place on your collarbone where your pulse beats hardest, if you are suddenly remembering the exact texture of the silence they left behind, I need you to stay with me. This is not a message about pain. This is a message about what grows in the soil that pain has softened. If you can feel it, if your heart is doing that strange arrhythmic dance that happens when truth is trying to find a door into a room you have kept locked, hit that like button, not as currency, as a bell, as a single note struck in a chapel where no one else is praying but you. Subscribe to this channel because this is where the letters that were never sent finally get delivered. And drop the word soften in the comments. Not as a command, as a prayer. As the sound of a wall you built starting to let the light through. Now, let me tell you what they have been doing since that night, because the crying was not the end, the crying was the birth canal. And what has emerged on the other side is someone you have never met. Someone who has been forged in the specific fire of your absence. They started with the letter, not immediately. First there was the wandering, the weeks of walking through their life like a tourist in a city that used to be home. Every street corner had a memory of you. The bakery where you always stopped to look at the croissants, even though you never bought one. The park bench where you read while they ran. The two of you existing in parallel, which had once felt like enough. The intersection where you always reached for their hand and they sometimes let you hold it and sometimes pulled away because they were checking their phone, because they were distracted, because they had not yet learned that a hand reaching for yours is the only prayer that matters. They walked past these places and felt the memories not as nostalgia, but as evidence. A trial was underway in their own mind, and they were the defendant, and the prosecution was every moment of carelessness they had ever offered you. So they started talking to a therapist, perhaps, to a friend who was brave enough to tell the truth instead of validating their escape narrative, to their own reflection in the mirror during mornings that felt too long and nights that felt endless, and the talking became listening to the recordings their memory had preserved. The sound of your voice when you asked if they were happy, and they had said yes without looking up from their screen. The sound of your footsteps in the hallway, pausing outside their closed door, waiting for an invitation that never came. The sound of your breathing when you finally fell asleep after a fight, your back turned to them, your body curled into a question mark that they were too proud to answer. They listened to these recordings until their ears bled, until they could no longer pretend that they were the victim of your intensity, until they understood with a clarity that felt like a blade that they were the author of their own loneliness. And then, slowly, they began to change. Not for you, not yet. At first, they changed because they could not bear the person they had discovered in the wreckage. They started showing up differently in their other relationships. When a friend spoke, they listened with their whole body, the way you used to listen to them. When a colleague was struggling, they offered help without being asked, the way you always did. When their family demanded their attention, they gave it fully, without the resentment that used to leak through their politeness. They became, in small increments, the person you had always believed they could be. And every time they acted with the kindness they had once withheld from you, they felt a piercing sweetness mixed with sorrow. Because they were finally learning the lessons you had tried to teach them, and you were not there to see it. You were not there to receive it. The classroom was empty, and the teacher had already gone home. That is when the letter became inevitable. They could not carry the transformation inside them anymore. It was too heavy, too alive, too insistent on being shared. They bought the blue envelope because it reminded them of your dress. They chose the pen because it was the same one you had given them for an anniversary they had forgotten to celebrate properly. They sat down at the kitchen table under the too bright light, and they wrote, not a text, not an email, a letter, ink on paper, irrevocable, permanent. The kind of communication that cannot be deleted or edited or softened by the buffer of a screen. They wrote until their hand cramped. They crossed out sentences. They started over. They cried onto the paper, leaving small, warped circles where the ink bloomed like flowers in a flood. And what emerged was not an apology in the cheap, transactional sense. Not the I am sorry you feel that way that passes for remorse in the modern world. It was an autopsy, a careful, loving, brutal dissection of their own failure. They wrote about the specific moment they knew they were losing you, the Tuesday evening when you brought them tea and they did not look up from their laptop, the way you stood there for 7 seconds, waiting, and then retreated to the other room without a word. They wrote about the vacation they ruined by checking their email on the beach while you built a sandcastle alone. They wrote about the birthday where they bought you a gift card because they had run out of time, and the look on your face when you opened it, the look that was not disappointment in the gift but grief over the lack of thought. They wrote about every time they made you feel like an inconvenience when you were actually the point. They named their sins not to beg for forgiveness, but to prove that they finally understood the magnitude of what they had destroyed. They wrote, "I did not leave because you were too much. I left because I was too small to hold what you were offering, and I have spent every day since then growing, not so that you will take me back, but because I finally see that growing is the only way to become someone who deserves to have known you at all." And then the offer, not a demand, not a plea, an offer. They wrote about the new architecture they want to build, not a return to what was, because what was had cracks in its foundation that no amount of nostalgia can seal a new beginning, a structure with more windows, more light, more room for your voice, your standards, your meticulous, beautiful way of loving. They wrote about the therapy they have committed to, not as a performance, but as a permanent practice. They wrote about the boundaries they have drawn with the people who enabled their avoidance. They wrote about the job they left, or the habit they broke, or the apartment they are leaving, because every space that supported their old self has become uninhabitable now that they know who they want to be. And they wrote the question, the only question that matters. Not will you take me back, not can we try again, but would you be willing to meet me in a new country, a place neither of us has been before, where I can show you who I am becoming, and you can decide with no obligation if there is room for me in the life you are building. Virgo, they are holding that letter right now. As you read this, their hand is on the envelope. Their heart is hammering against their ribs with a force that makes them slightly nauseous. They are terrified, not of rejection. They have made their peace with rejection. They are terrified that you have already healed past the point of wanting them, that your life, which was always more beautiful and more functional than they gave you credit for, has bloomed in their absence into something so complete that their offer is no longer relevant. They are terrified that they took too long, that the night of crying happened too late, that the letter, however sincere, is simply a monument to a lesson you have already learned and moved on from. They are standing at the mailbox, or at the door of your building, or at the send button of an email they have drafted and deleted 100 times, and they are trying to find the courage to let the letter go. Because once it is sent, it is real. And once it is real, they must face the possibility that the person they have finally become worthy of has already closed the door. And you are standing on the other side of that door. Not literally, perhaps, but energetically. You have been building a life without them. You have been organizing your days with the precision that is your gift, filling the spaces they left with work, with friends, with the small daily rituals that keep you grounded. You have been telling yourself that you are fine, that the grief has passed, that the love you felt was real but is now archived, filed under, completed, stored in a box on a shelf you no longer reach for. And most of the time, you believe it. You believe it until a song comes on, until you pass a bakery, until you wake up at 3 a.m. with their name in your mouth like a stone, and then you know that the archive is not sealed. You know that a part of you, the softest part, the part you protect with your competence and your schedules and your perfectly maintained boundaries, that part is still waiting, still hoping, still listening for the sound of footsteps that might never come. So here is what I need you to do. Not to take them back, not to forgive them, not to make any decision at all before you are ready, but to soften, just a fraction, just enough to let the possibility breathe. The next time you think of them, Do not immediately reach for the list of reasons why it ended. Do not recite the injuries like a rosary designed to keep your heart closed. Instead, let yourself wonder, let yourself ask, quietly and without commitment, what if they have changed? Not because you owe them the benefit of the doubt, not because you are required to be generous with someone who was once careless with you, but because you deserve the possibility of joy. And joy, real joy, often arrives disguised as the very thing we thought we had lost. When the letter arrives, or the message, or the knock at the door that comes at an hour when you are not expecting anyone, I want you to receive it with your whole self present, not your defensive self, not your performative self, not the version of you that is so good at holding boundaries that she forgets how to open doors. I want you to let them see you, the real you, the you that is still hurt, the you that is still angry, the you that is curious, the you that is hopeful. Let them see all of it, because the person who wrote that letter is not looking for the polished version of you. They are looking for the truth. And the truth is that you loved them, that their leaving broke something, and that the broken place, if it is tended with honesty, can become the foundation for something stronger than what existed before. Do not say yes immediately. Do not say no immediately. Say, I hear you. Say, I need time. Say, show me. Make them prove that the letter is not just words. Make them demonstrate over days and weeks and small, consistent actions that the person who wrote it is the person who is standing in front of you. Let them earn the right to your softness. Let them learn the geography of your new boundaries. Let them understand that a second chance is not a rewind button, but a foreign country where both of you must learn the language from scratch. And if, after all of that, after the showing and the waiting and the careful, patient rebuilding, you find that the door can open again, then open it slowly. Open it with both hands. Open it like a gardener opening a greenhouse after a long winter, letting the light in gradually so the plants do not shock. Let them step inside, not as a conqueror returning to claim territory, but as a traveler who has been lost and is grateful for the warmth of your hearth. Let them sit in your presence and feel the weight of what they almost lost. Let them look at you, really look at you, and see that your glow has not diminished in their absence. If anything, it has become more defined, more specific, more unmistakably yours. I want to leave you with an image, because images are what heal when words have exhausted themselves. Imagine 2 cups on a table. They are not fancy cups. They are the ones you already own, the ones with the small chips near the rim that you have never thrown away because they fit your hands too well. The steam is rising from both. Tea, perhaps, or coffee. Something warm that requires patience to drink. The window behind the table is fogged over from the heat inside and the cold outside, and there are 2 people sitting there, not touching yet, not speaking yet, just breathing the same air, just being in the same room without the need to perform or explain or justify. One of them reaches out, not to touch the other, but to the glass. They draw a heart in the condensation. It is imperfect. It is slightly lopsided. It begins to fade almost as soon as it is drawn, the water tracing its way down the pane in small, inevitable rivers. But for a moment it is there, clear and true and entirely visible. That is what is coming, Virgo. not a grand restoration, not a perfect reconstruction, a heart drawn in breath on a surface that is already changing, a moment of visibility in a world that is constantly fogging over, an offer, trembling and real, sliding across your table in a blue envelope that matches a dress you have tried to forget. The letter is on its way. The person who wrote it is no longer the person who left, and you are no longer the person who was left. You are both new, both uncertain, both brave enough to wonder if the end was actually a comma, and if the next sentence is one you want to write together. Soften your shoulders, let the wall breathe, and when the knock comes, when the envelope lands, when the name you have been trying not to say appears on your screen or at your door, do not hide. Do not armor up. Simply be there, present, exact, glowing with the same unapologetic light that made them love you in the first place, and that made them realize too late and then just in time exactly what they had lost. The tea is steeping, the window is fogging, the heart is being drawn even now, in a kitchen too quiet, under a light too bright, by a hand that has finally learned how to hold a pen with the weight of truth. Let it arrive, let it land, and let yourself be soft enough to see what happens next.